Joining me via phone this morning. I actually didn't even, I presume he's somewhere in Milwaukee. Skylar Croy, who is a deputy counsel for Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, is joining me this morning to give us some good news. However, before I bring him on, I wanted to share a little bit about Skylar. He graduated second in his class from the University of Wisconsin Law School. He served as the editor-in-chief of the Wisconsin Law Review, clerked for Chief Justice Pat Rogensack, and then also clerked for Justice Rebecca Bradley. He's published numerous scholarly articles which have been cited by multiple state Supreme Courts. Also, in his free time, he is earning his master's degree from Harvard University. He studies government through Harvard Extension School. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Electrical and Computer Engineering. Oh my gosh, this guy. And he is also a captain in the Wisconsin Army National Guard. If you want something done, you ask a busy person to do it. And indeed, Skylar has made a difference in the town of Hayward. Good morning, Skylar. How are you?
Good morning. Well, it was a really successful night last night, and I'm looking forward to talking about it. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. And, you know, I wasn't even aware that there was a special meeting last night. I knew that you had, there was a press release that went out about the town of Hayward complying with the law following a lawsuit, but I know there was a special meeting called. So if you would at least start by describing the situation and why Will had to file a lawsuit in the first place against the town of Hayward.
Sure. So there is a somewhat obscure statute in Wisconsin that says if a town holds an annual town meeting on the third Tuesday of April, the town doesn't have to comply with public notice requirements. So the town of Hayward took advantage of that. They had an annual town meeting this past April on the third Tuesday. It was not properly noticed. People didn't know about it, and a bunch of controversial stuff got passed. Not a lot of people showed up. I think these votes were something along the lines of like 20 to 15, 25 to 15, and there's about 3,600 people in this town. The big controversy was a $15 million building project for a new civic center. It seemed like the members of the town board wanted this a lot, and there's at least an appearance that they got some of their friends to show up to this meeting, and the rest of the town didn't know about it, and they were able to pass it. So the town found out about this, and the people were very concerned because it would result in a very significant increase to property taxes. And they decided to petition for what's called a special town meeting, which is basically a meeting where you rescind the things that were done at the annual town meeting. And on 3 occasions, they collected a sufficient number of signatures to do that. Their petitions were all lawfully valid, and they turned them in to the town clerk, and the town clerk just said, no, I'm not going to do this. And for the most part, was also very obscure about what the actual problems with these 3 petitions were. Will got contacted and decided to get involved because we were very concerned that the town clerk wouldn't comply with the law and hold this special town meeting. So we filed a lawsuit, and while that lawsuit was pending, our client filed a 4th petition, and the 4th petition was materially identical in all relevant respects to the first 3. But lo and behold, with the lawsuit pending, the town clerk did, in fact, publicly notice the special town meeting. That special town meeting took place last night, and overwhelmingly, standing room only, people standing outside because they couldn't get into the actual town hall, overwhelmingly voted to get rid of this $15 million voting project. It was a hand vote, but if I had to guess, it was probably 300 to 10.
That is such great news. So were you present or were you watching virtually?
I was present. I'm actually in Hayward right now. I drove up here last night to just observe and make sure that there was no shenanigans or funny business, and watched the meeting. And I'm going to drive back to Madison in a couple hours here.
I suppose you received a hero's welcome when you came. And I mean, this just attests to the power of local citizens being engaged and involved in their local government and how they can indeed make a difference. Obviously, they had to have legal representation, but thank God for Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty.
Yeah, Meg, and thank God for citizens that are willing to actually keep track of what their government is doing. It was, frankly, inspirational to go to a small town like this and to see that people actually were paying attention to what their government was doing and that they were on top of this. I'm not sure that a lot of towns would have been able to pull this off. So I think the people of Hayward really have something to be very proud of today. And it's a big deal for a lot of them. You know, people were coming up to me last night saying, I don't think I would have been able to afford this increase in property taxes. I would have lost my home. And the people got together and they said, we're not going to tolerate this.
Gosh, I don't. If I could, we could do a group hug. I mean, I presume that those that were present at the meeting last night were jubilant because, as you stated or described, it was standing room only, and that just goes to show that it really does make a difference when local citizens get involved in their government and pay attention. I mean, ultimately, I am. Well, I'm very impressed with, I presume, your client who did this research and found out that there's this third Tuesday. I mean, it honestly sounds like something out of a, I don't know, out of a fictional novel, where the third Tuesday of the, I don't know, on a full moon. No, I mean, it just seems peculiar to me that the annual town meeting would be held in the dark of night, I guess, or in the dark of a Tuesday, third Tuesday, that those would take advantage of that. And I mean, I can't believe that was coincidental, that they were able to push forward this $15 million building project. Is there any indication as to the, I don't know, the political leanings of those on this town board that decided to make this decision without input from the citizens of the town of Hayward?
You know, Meg, that's actually a really good question, and I wish I knew the answer to it, but I don't, unfortunately. I believe it's at least technically a nonpartisan board.
Oh, sure.
But as I think most people who have dealt with supposedly nonpartisan things, we all know that that's not how stuff works in the real world.
I guess I'm wondering about the role that the town clerk played in all of this as well, and if she had I don't know, I'm trying to think of the right word, if she had the authority to refuse these requests for, these three other requests for meetings. I mean, was that in her purview to do?
She did not have the authority to do that, no. Each time she did that, she was violating the law. The way that the Wisconsin statutes work, and as you mentioned, hats off to our client for figuring all this out, because she did a lot of this before Will ever got involved, and really came to us with a case prepared. We didn't do a lot of sophisticated legal research for this. We really took a lot of what our client did and ran with it. But these statutes, which are in Chapter 60 of the Wisconsin statutes, make very clear the town clerk doesn't have discretion to, look at something and say, oh, I don't think that's very well worded or anything like that. To call a special town meeting, your petition has to say the time, date, and purpose of the meeting. And each time There was a time that each time the petitions were turned in, they very clearly stated a time, a date, and that the purpose was to rescind resolutions that were passed at the annual town meeting. So she did not have discretion to do this. And at least I think the first or the second time didn't even provide a reason for the denial. Just said, no, I'm not going to publicly notice that. And then on the third time, her reason was something along the lines of, well, there's some language in a cover letter you included that doesn't match verbatim what's on the petition form, so I'm not going to notice it because how would I ever be able to figure out what the purpose of this meeting is when the cover letter doesn't have the verbatim same language as the petition? As if we can't figure out what we're trying to do here.
How insulting! You know what I'm curious about, was she acting unilaterally, or was she acting under the advisement of others on the town board? I mean, is that the impression that your client got? Is that there was sort of a cabal of people in the town that were behind this?
Well, my impression, and I do want to be clear about this, is under the law, it's the town clerk who makes these decisions, so the buck kind of stops with her. My impression, having observed some of this, is that there was at least an implicit understanding among leaders in this town about how this was going to go down. Precisely who said what or how that all worked, I wish I knew, but I don't. But again, I do want to emphasize, regardless of who in leadership was saying what, it is the town clerk under the law who has the statutory duty to publicly notice these meetings.
Well, and gee, as a citizen of the community, you'd think she would want to be a better neighbor or better citizen, a fellow citizen to her fellow taxpayers there. Well, maybe she's up for re-election, Skylar.
Well, let me give you a little bit more context here on some of what was going on. So this was mostly about a $15 million building project, but there was also a resolution to rescind the job position of town clerk / treasurer. So I've been saying town clerk, but it's actually a combined clerk and treasurer position that had been created at the annual town meeting. And the idea was, and I hope I have my facts right here, but the town had a part-time clerk and a part-time treasurer, and they wanted to combine them and create something closer to a full-time position and then pay $51,000 a year. Well, the average person in Hayward makes something like $28,000 a year, right? And so she benefited a lot from this. The town clerk had benefited a lot from the annual town meeting that created this clerk treasurer position.
Wow.
And I would imagine there was a little bit of a conflict of interest going on here in publicly noticing a meeting where the people were going to basically vote on whether to undo this position that she had found herself in.
Wow, that's really curious.
And they did. By the way, I should add that position is gone. I'm not sure what that means in terms of whether she'll go back to being perhaps a part-time employee of the town or how that's going to work. But as of today, there is no such thing as the clerk / treasurer of the town of Hayward.
Wow. Well, and maybe someone in that community will decide that they want to. I mean, because I presume it's the town clerk is an elected position, is it not?
Don't quote me on this. I believe it's hired by the board, and the board is elected.
Because I know in Marathon County, at least the county clerk is. So, well, that's curious. Well, Skylar, I got to let you go. This is great news. It's a good way to kick off for our listeners that are on their way to work. It's a good way to kick off your day. This might be the only good news we'll hear all day today. So I'm glad that you were on the show to deliver it, and keep up the great work. Thank you so much for what you're doing to contribute to Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty and really to preserve our freedoms and liberties here in Wisconsin. I appreciate it.
Of course, and thank you so much for having me on, Meg.